Hi, good evening, everyone. So we'll start off with this session, first chapter of deep neural network. I'll just share my screen. So I hope you can see my screen. So the topics for today is so how we'll be taking this. First of all, the course is called Vision AI, and the reason for that is because I'm into that field and I've been learning that from last 4 months. And the session is actually recorded, so if anybody wants, they can have and go through it again. And towards the end of the session, we'll have some assignments, and I would ask people to attempt it, because that will be the prerequisite for the next session that we'll have. And this session is going to be for 1 hour, and we'll be covering the very high level definitions of the concepts in deep neural networks, especially related to the vision AI domain. So I'm hoping people having some understanding about what is artificial intelligence based on what we had covered in the first session of us. And so let's get started. And I think this is the approach that I will be looking for if you really want to and seriously want to get into the field of artificial intelligence. And yes, vision AI is a specialty in it, but it's not the something which is completely different from NLP or something which is different from the signal processing in terms of audio. So vision AI learning, it means that you have almost learned 80% or 90% of what AI is. And when it comes to working with any other domain of data, be it textual, NLP or any other thing, it's just about learning the new architecture, learning how to process that particular type of data set and how to represent in terms of neural networks. So the approach here is I would request you all to first learn through this session that we are having for an hour, and while you'll be attempting your assignments, that's when you'll be tempted to do some kind of research work, because there'll be lots of terms that will be very new and you won't be able to understand at the first. So I would encourage you to go and Google it, and any and whatever terms that you come across which is not understood in first attempt. So you can also ask me in this same session, and if there is anything that I'm not able to answer, or if you still have doubt which you are feeling not to ask in the session, you can go ahead and Google it. So there are plenty of resources online. The purpose of having this session here is to just channelize the topics that the way how I have learned it from last 4 months. And yes, so I am part of this this course called EVA, which is organized which is conducted by the School of AI, and it's basically a Bangalore based AI institute, and they basically teach you a specialization of vision AI in terms of AI domain. And there are lots of basic, advanced and beginner level the way how the course is structured. So I think we in our course are almost halfway done, and we'll be starting off with the intermediate and advanced level courses. But what I'm conducting here is what I had learned 4 months back. So I'll be in a better situation to answer any of your beginner level questions which you may find during this session. So please don't hesitate and just unmute yourself if you have any doubts, and you can ask me. So keep this 4 mantra in your mind, that this is how why we have compete here is because without competition and without a reward, you just won't get the interest to learn and research. So there has to be some kind of bonus, there has to be some gain in the effort that you are putting right now. So that's the mantra that we are going to follow. Learn from the session, research yourself, compete. That means the assignment that I'll be giving you, you have to complete it within the deadline. So without deadline, there is no competition. I would expect you to follow the proper planning and complete it. And as and when we go ahead with future chapters, I would request you to keep repeating the same procedure. So let's get started with the chapter 1, deep neural network. And this is what I'm expecting students and those who are beginner to the domain of AI and vision AI. So I would expect this should be your emotion, and this should be your excitement when you finish this particular course, and at least the initial couple of chapters. There should be a sense of excitement and the sense of achievement within you when you understand even the basic of internals, what's happening inside a neural network, and convolution neural network for that case. So yep, so just trying to build an intuition here. What you see here is a representation of how your brain might be working inside, because it's still a mystery. There are scientists who are experimenting with the brain and the signals that you get out of it, and they're trying to represent in a way so that general public can understand how it is, so that the research community can understand how to approach or how to tackle the challenges of understanding the human brain. So what you see here is there are trillions of neurons and their synapses. Basically, if you had attended the last session, the first session of mine, you would have understood that a brain or a neuron is something which forms your brain, and there are billions and trillions of neurons that form your brain, and they have to communicate with each other with the help of signals that they throw out. So one neuron, if it has to communicate with other neuron, it has to have some kind of fire within it, and what you see on the screen is nothing but the neurons which are firing, and they are sending the signals to each other. What you also see here is if you see the direction of this fire is from outside to inside. If you see a couple of flashes, those are nothing but the sensors, the synapses of your neuron. So your brain, what it has is it has lots of basically components: synapses, the cortex, the neurons, the cell body, the central processing unit of brain itself, so that every neuron which is part of the cell has its own processing unit, how it processes the external signals received by the neighborhood neurons or any external sensory inputs. So this is the intuition that you have to understand. What you see that all the neurons or the signals are being sent towards the center of your brain, that also gives us a hint that there must be something in the center of your brain which is processing, just like how we have our PCs. So we have keyboards, we have mice, we have the monitors, and whenever we are trying to give it a signal, we are giving it an external input. There is a CPU standing in the center of your PC which is trying to process everything. So yep, so it's an ultra dense connected network, okay, which is making sure that your information is flowing across. So the information that you get through the outer sensors is flowing within these neurons. And if you want to know more about how not really how your brain works, but then what are the different important parts of your brain, and in a very easy to understand way, this is the link that I would ask you to follow. Just go for this link, and it has very small number of 10 pages like this one, and this image again is something which it will be going through a couple of words and just try to understand what these maybe in a summary how the brain works. So it's very simple words, just go for it if you get time, and just try to understand what each of these how exactly your brain functions, what is the step, what's the process, how it extracts a signal from the outer periphery and then tries to send it to the central processing unit. So this is the link for that. Okay, eyes. Okay, why are we talking about eyes? Because we are talking about vision AI. Vision AI is all about visuals, the way how and for that we have to understand why we are only talking about the human eyes. That's because we think that we can make, as a human, we always feel that we are the smartest species here, and we try to replicate our own smartness into the devices. So, and deep neural network is a way how we feel that we should be able to compare our brain with. So what you're seeing here is an eye, human eye, which is how we attract all the visual inputs which our brain is processing. So eye is the visual organ, visual sensor for our body. So yep. What you see here is, again, your eye is a visual sensor. It's just similar to how your camera, so if you might have used mobile camera, or if you have a proper cameras at your home, you must be having an idea that how camera works, right? It has some kind of sensors, it has some kind of lenses, there must be multiple layer of lenses if you have very high hi-fi camera which are having lots of focal variations and the and the resolutions. So based on that, the advancements in the camera, you'll have multiple lenses in cameras, and that's how exactly how even your eyes work. Your eyes have sensors which get your data from your, let's say what you see here in the front of your eye is nothing but your lens, and if you zoom that in, I'll be showing you the picture of how exactly it is, taking the outside information and passing it through your cones and rods. So basically your eye pupils are made up of what you see here in the smallest of these things here, this white color here. If you actually observe this into a microscope, you'll be able to see that you have lots of rods and cones that get the outside environmental senses, and it tries to send it to the lens which is lying behind your eye. So these are acting as a synapses, just like I said, the brains, and then they send it to the sensor which is lying just behind your eye, and your sensor is something which is trying to interpret what exactly it has sensed. Yep, so this is how it is. All what you see outside is because of the light. So first the data that you're getting from your eye is being recorded with the help of these axons, and that is actually then sent to your sensor, which is again lying at the back of it here. And that's very similar to, if you see this layered representation of how eye is processing the visual information, human have tried to replicate the same process, using the machine. So this is what you see is an HD camera wherein you are having multiple such lenses which are trying to filter the information. For example, you might have a lens which is trying to okay, just a second. So you might have a sensor which is trying to maybe de-blur the data that is coming. You might have a sensor that's kind of enlarging the outside data that's coming, and then finally after all the layers of lenses, what you see at the end here is the sensor wherein all your information gets imprinted. So this is how your eyes is represented and how mechanical cameras are built. And this is what I was talking. So when you look at your eye pupils into a microscope, this is how you will see. These are the cones and rods of your eyes. So maybe this is a lot of biological term, and if you are interested, you can go into the details of, because that's how what Vision AI is all about. It's about understanding how we see the virtual world, the outside world, and how our brain processes this information to give us an understanding of what we get. So what you see here, okay, our eyes basically, if you would have realized, we have known that we can detect 3 kinds of colors: red, green and blue, right? And all the other colors that you see in front of you, even on this screen, what you see, all the purple, magenta, yellow, these are all the combination of those 3 basic colors. So going by the assumption that our eye can see 3 different colors, that is red, green and blue, this is the image that I want you to focus on. What is this image? This here is showing that the camera sensor that we have, if you observe, so these 2 images, that what you see are the microscopic view of your real eye and the camera sensors. So the camera sensors, again, as I said, human try to replicate the way how our brain works. So if our eye has 3 color sensors for recognizing red, green and blue, the same thing has been replicated in camera lenses as well. So what you see here is a camera lens put into the camera sensor, which is put into the microscope, electron microscope. That's why you are able to see such a minute details. And what you see here is a red, green and blue channel, right? Red, green and blue channel. Okay, so focus on the word called channel, because that's something which is going to be the very important base for understanding why we how we deal with the vision related data, or how we deal with the colors. So we have 3 different colors which are sensed by the camera lens, and based on what it actually sees outside, it will have its own kind of representation. Let's say if the image is of apple, so there will be more of red sensors here that will be kind of firing. It's like a neuron. So if a sensor says that okay, this is a red apple, I'll have to display a red image to the user. So I should be storing this particular image into a red colored object. So that's why it has 3 different possibilities, and based on what intensity it sees on the outside object, it will try to represent that, and that's how it will be storing the outside images. Okay, so yep, the first important concept here what we are looking at is the channel. And before I go into the details, let's just understand this particular image. So I would ask some question to the audience here. So okay, the question here is, as I said, there are RGB, 3 different colors, right? But okay, are you also aware that these are just the channels which are used into a digital medium? Like when I say digital, in the sense something that can be electronically stored, which is, let's say, what you're seeing on the screen, it's a monitor. If you're storing it into some kind of electronic devices, it's a digital format. The information that it is being stored for this particular image is stored in 3 color channels, that is red, green and blue. So can somebody tell me what you're seeing on the right hand side? What is that called? And have you heard of this particular color combination?
I've seen it in printers.
It's for printing. Yeah. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is for chromatic, I think. So I'm not sure about K.
Yeah, so that's correct. So what you see here is that, and I have a question here again. So let's say if there is a painter that comes to your house and maybe you have he's trying to create your portrait or something, and then what he'll do is maybe he'll capture it with, after painting that particular thing, maybe he'll have to convert and store it in digital format. So maybe he'll take his iPhone and he'll capture that particular paint. So now what you have here is, you have a paint, okay, a real canvas painting. You have a camera which has a photo of that paint, and let's say now you also, so camera is having, if you see, it's a digital format. So what it will do is, it will have stored the information what it has seen in the paint into only 3 channels, that is red, green and blue. What is seen by the painter, so how many colors do you think he would have used for painting you? Is it only red, green and blue, or is it more than that? Of course there will be thousands of colors, there will be hundreds or dozens of colors that he will be trying and mixing with each other to come up with a skin color, and likewise there will be lots of combination that he will be trying. So you see the difference, right? The way how you represent the information could be different, and it is possible that the output looks same in both the ways. So again, as I said, the picture that you have stored in your camera, and when you look at the real painting, they will be looking same to you. That's because even though the number of colors that I use by both of these media, the one is the camera, other is the real painting, the painter who has designed this photo. Even the number of paints colors are different, but they look the same. The information that he's trying to convey is same, right? And if, let's say, if the same digital photo that he has captured, if it has to go for a newspaper printing, okay, there will be 4 different channels for that, CMYK. So now what you have to understand here is that channels are just the way how to represent your information. The same information can also be represented by using some other combination of different channels. So here I'm talking in terms of color domain, the vision domain. Let's also have an kind of an example of how we'll do it in textual domain. Okay, let's have this particular example. Okay, these are a couple of it's a word cloud, and we have used the technical jargons here, but there's nothing. It's a very simple image. But okay, let's understand. I have a question for you guys, that how many different alphabets have been used in this particular image? How many different alphabets have been used? So this is the image.
Alphabets 26 are only there, right?
Yep, that's correct. So we try to understand that by just using 26 alphabets, we have covered the entire information, and each of these 26 alphabets are called as a channel. So when I was talking about the vision domain, right, I was talking about the colors, pixel colors. But when I'm talking of the textual domain, NLP domain, I'm talking about the unique alphabets. You can also think about the numbers, but let's just talk about the alphabets. Just imagine that just by using 26 different channels, that is 26 different alphabets, we can make the entire concept, that we can actually write an entire book by just using 26 alphabets. So the minutest unit of, or the smallest unit of any information is what you can imagine it as a, basically your channel. So here we have 26 different channels, and what you see here on the screen, let's say if this is A, right, Now I want you to visualize why do you think it is A, because you have been taught this way that what looks like this is supposed to be A, right? It's about learning the alphabet basically. So when you were taught that this is A, there must be other representations of A as well. They will look slightly different, but the channel is same, right? This is what I'm trying. So what you see here is an E channel, right? Like what you see in the end here is a G channel. And your mind is trained to say that, okay, you can identify or recognize different channels within a text. Just like here, you can say that there are 3 different channels in this first image, there are 4 different channels in the second image. So that's the NLP example, and that's a visual example of how this channels look like. Now I would like to ask another example, which is let's say, okay, there was another image I wanted to show you guys. Let me just search it. Okay, this particular image. Okay, so I want you guys to, okay, there must be singer as well, so without a singer there is nothing. So I want to find something which also has a singer. Cool. Okay, so this is the image that I'm talking about. Okay, now I have a question to all the attendees. What do you think, which song is this based on your experience? Which song is this? I need answers. Any idea? Or
Rock
you,
or
which one?
maybe rock.
Good guess. Any other guesses? So yep, so until somebody says that it's a rock on song, or if I say it's not rock on, it's let's say Taal Se Taal Mila song, or if it's anything weird, let's say some kind of Bhojpuri music or some kind of Tamil music, would you believe that? You wouldn't, right? Because you know that until an information is put into your brain, because the person who has seen the Rock On movie and what you see at the bottom, there's people raising their hands, you would realize easily that yeah, this is something related to Rock On. I would have seen it in the past. But somebody who is totally new to this particular image, he will not be able to say that what song this people are playing. Okay, so what if I say that there is a singer here who is saying Asama Hai Neela, something like that? You will realize that yeah, this song is something which I have heard. This particular lyrics is something which I have heard. But if I just tell you that there is some kind of let's say, even for this particular guy who is handling the bass here, the one who is handling let's say guitar or the drum here, if he's playing his own music which is not in sync with what the singer is singing, you won't be able to relate them to each other. That's when you will not be able to guess that okay, this is the Rock On song, or is it something random song. What I try to say is that just like how we saw characters here, right, just like how we saw 26 different channels being composed, being written together to form words and sentences, let's say, to make some logic out of it, to make some meaning out of it. We also have this image wherein there are 4 different artists who are performing a song, and until they are all shown in single picture, you won't, let's say if I hide the first one, if I just say that okay, the image can't go, so let's say if I hide if I only show you the middle one, the second drummer, you won't be able to guess what song is this being played. But if you see the entire all the 4 artists, you'll be able to guess okay, this is what the song I'm talking about. So these 4 different things what you're seeing are acting as a channel. they are just like alphabets A to Z. They are also acting as a, let's say there is a guitarist, there is a drummer, there is a singer, and when you combine them, you get to know about what information they are trying to represent, right? So this is what channel means. Channels are, and here what you see is an example of how our eyes, they see the different image and how they try to. So now this what you're seeing here is that an image being taken by the sensors, right, and it's going down, and because of some filter which is lying, if you see the animation carefully, right after the image is captured, it passes through a black color filter here, and after that your image gets split into 4 different channels, CMYK for example. Now what is happening here is we are trying to split the channels. So when, let's say, if this particular image comes to your head, right, and if you are if you are a small kid who doesn't know how to pronounce, how to read a complete word, so how he will start? He'll start detecting the characters here, M, A, C. So if he doesn't know how H looks like, he will say, what is this rubbish? Okay, but then if he knows, okay, what is I, then that's how he'll be trying to understand, okay, this is what this particular content what I'm seeing is. He won't be able to make sense out of it, but at least he can recognize the characters, the channels. So this is what happening here. The kids filter doesn't know how to maybe make sense out of it altogether, but what it can do is it can at least sense these 2 different these 5 or these 6 different channels, different alphabets. So this is what is happening here also. Your visuals information that is being captured by your eye, the representer here is showing that it passes through some kind of filter, and the RGB filter that your eyes have, it tries to split them into 4 different channels. So this is what a channel means, and in alphabets this is what they are characters. In terms of visuals, as far as human eye is concerned, it is about R, G and B colors. Moving on to the next, there is another this analogy that if you see that Netflix and all are still pretty new, but if you think about the television that we used to watch 10 or 15 years back, we used to have Cartoon Network, we used to have Animal Planet, or we used to have Star Plus, wherein you'll get all the family drama. But if you observe it carefully, you will notice that a particular channel, a TV channel is what I'm talking about, will only show a particular type of stream. So if you're at Cartoon Network, you won't be able, you will not be seeing Arnab Goswami going there and trying to act weird. You won't be seeing an elephant going to Republic TV and trying to eat something or something like that. So a particular channel has its own purpose. That is the type of information that it tries to show to the people, and this is the same thing which I am trying to say when I'm saying the channels. A channel is nothing but a collection of similarly looking content. So if I'm saying M here, there could be capital M, there could be another cursive M, but then they are all same channel, they are all M, right? That's the thing here. And okay, so for now we have understood what channels are. Let's go ahead and see what's next. Okay, what you're seeing here is called the Board CAD experiments. Well, this is not the real name of the experiment, because this experiment is slightly gruesome, and it was performed in 1960s by the scientists and who were interested to analyze how a cat's brain works. So this was all about understanding how a cat's brain processes what it sees in front of it. So for this experiment, there were a requirement for 2 cats, and the first cat is this one, which is completely bored, and it is just lying there, shaking its tail, looking here and there. So this is the kind of requirement that the scientist had. So this was the first cat. The second cat they wanted was some cat which is very focused about its work, so that they can know the difference between what a distracted cat looks like and how it processes the information, and how a focused cat looks like and how it processes the information. So the second cat that we have is this one. So it's very focused. Cool. Now what they did is, what exactly is the Board CAD experiment? So what they did is, first they took the cat number 1 and they basically tied its head with some kind of rope and all, so that it cannot move in any direction. It has its own constant straight vision, and then they put lots of electrodes in its head, so that they can also sense the signals that are coming out of the cat's brain. And the experiment was to put an image of a dartboard. So if you have a dartboard, the experiment was to put an image of a dartboard right in front of a cat for, let's say, 1 second. And as soon as the cat is able to see the dartboard, you take a gun and you shoot it. You shoot the cat, it dies. That's how the experiment is done. Now, the second cat was performed, the experiment was performed in the same way. The second cat was taken, and again it was tied with the rope and everything so that it cannot move. It was again showed with the same image, right, with the first, which the first cat had been shown. And as soon as it sees, again this was shot again. So, and yep, this is how the experiment was, because that at that time scientists had thought that cat's brain is something which is closest to the human brain. After all, all are basically the animals. So the way how we process the information, it has to be the same, similar. So what did they achieve out of it? Okay, they just showed cat and they had some kind of electrodes put on their head, and they tried to capture some kind of sensory input what their brain had recorded. So what was the result of this experiment? What exactly did they detect out of the sensors? So this is the result that I'm going to show you. Now what you see on the left side is the image representation of a dartboard. What you see on the right side is the representation of cat's sensory input that the cat's brain had received. The electrodes were reading some kind of inputs from the cat's brain, and this is the plot of that particular input. So I need somebody to explain me what's happening here. What do you see and why am I seeing this particular, what observations do you have first of all? Anybody? And why is it like that? Anybody? And do you think the cat's brain is like the one shown on the right side? Okay, I need an answer from somebody so that we have some kind of interactions. Yeah. What is happening here? I mean, what is the similarity or dissimilarity between these two images? What do you observe?
The bee image is a part of the cat's brain, or
yeah, it's basically the part of the cat's brain. So what they did is, when the electrodes that were put on the cat's head, the cat's brain, they were done with the readings and everything. They shot the cat, and then they basically completely opened the cat's brain. And since even if you know that a cat's brain is basically a crumbled sheet, it's like similar to a crumbled sheet of paper. It's like if you take a normal A4 size paper, if you try to just crumble it, it becomes like a ball, paper ball. Even the human's brain, I think in the last session, in the first session, I would have told you that even the human's brain have layers, and those layers are actually crumbled together to form a ball shape, like structure, which is what your brain looks like. So what you see here is a flattened part, a flattened sheet of cat's brain. Okay, that's the real experimental result. And yeah. And here, okay, let me tell you that what you're seeing here is that the result concluded saying that the cat's brain has a physical print of what it saw at the time it was dying. Okay. It could not forget it. There was no further processing before it could even think of what to do next. Right after when it saw the image, it was dead. So the last memory of the cat's brain was this particular print, what it had, and this is the real representation. So you can imagine that when I am looking at you in the chat box, or if you are looking at some animal or some looking at the tower or some natural part, your brain is actually having that particular shape in its layer. It's imprinted in your brain, and that's the reason why you are able to store the information and process the information, saying that this is basically an animal called dog. Now that's another part of a brain which actually processes the information, but this is the sensory input that we receive when we look at an object, be it a person, be it anybody. And that was again a motivator saying that, yep, I think the way how brain work is similar to how we should be able to train our machines to capture. So it's all about when we are dealing with deep neural networks, we are trying to tell machine that saying that try to capture the real image as it is, and then we'll make sense out of it later. So that's how all the story of capturing the image is started. So yep, as it says, the image on the left gets completely printed on our brain. That's true with us as well. So this is how the experiment setup was, if you see here. Now what you see on the left hand side, leftmost part here, is an edge. It's a particular shape which is, let's say, 45-degree inclined, and the cat's brain is trying to look at it and make sense out of it. And what you see on here is that there are different types of shapes, or basically it's a line which is, let's say, starting from the top, it starts from 0-degree angle, and then it keeps moving like 125, 90, 100, and like that. And there are, let's say, 8 of those particular such edges. So your cat is intelligent enough, or your cat's sensors are intelligent enough to recognize these 8 different lines as unique, right? These 8 different lines are nothing but the channels. So if you talk about human brain, we are talking about RGB colors. Our human brain is capable enough to understand what is red, green, and blue. But other than that, it's also capable enough to know that this is a straight line, this is a slant line, this is slightly more slant line. So what exactly do we mean when we say it's a slant line? We understand that our brain is capable to say that, okay, this is a unique line which is not similar to the one which is next. There is a filter which is running behind our brain, which as soon as it sees a line, it will have some kind of knowledge about it, saying that it's a flat line, it's a straight line. Those labels that it speaks out, those are the labels actually. Like how we saw in the first session, there's object detection. We try to detect an object and we try to give it a label, saying that it's a dog or a cat. The same way, what you see here are the features, basically the channels, and our human brain is trained to recognize it as a horizontal flat line. So this is what even the cat was able to see when it tried to print this particular image here. If you see here, these all edges what you see, they are combination of, let's say, one of these 8 edges. Okay, all these lines what you see on the right hand side, they are one of these particular set of edges. Because the cat is able to recognize this particular angle, it can store. So if you see, it's not exactly same as what you see on the left side. Maybe when we look at any person, we won't be stored the entire print of that how the person looks in our brain. There will be some kind of things that we are more attracted, or maybe we are more trained about. So maybe we can detect that particular feature or that particular edge better than the other part of the image. So this is what the channel and the board cat experiment all about, and how important it is to visualize the data that we are talking about. Okay, so what exactly is this thing? Here is basically is a normal computer vision algorithms that are run on the original image of Sudoku, and what they've done is they've kind of took the edges of the particular image and came out with this border. This is called as the edge extraction. Basically, only you show the borders or the edges of a particular shape. So if there is a 6 here, if you see the background informations are hidden, it's not really conversion from white background to black background. It's basically called as border extraction, edge extraction. And on top of that, when you as a human say that this is 6, it's nothing but a combination of you saying that I am seeing an horizontal line, I am seeing basically talking about, let's say, this particular figure called 6 here at the top. You would say that I can see combination of horizontal, slant, 45-degree line, maybe a 65-degree line, and maybe a straight line. So any figure over here is nothing but a combination of horizontal, vertical, and all the, let's say, the set of 8 edges that we saw here, right? And the bottom 2 images are saying the same. They're saying that the first image is only able to recognize all the vertical lines here. So if you see, even this Sudoku has this check boxes. The first image on the left is only showing you the vertically detected edges. The one on the right side is saying that I have detected all the horizontal edges. So what you're seeing here is that there are two different channels which are made out of the original image, right? And when you combine these two channels, you can get back your original image. So basically when we say that what are channels are nothing but the smallest unit, or maybe one of the unique way of how you are trying to represent that particular information. So when I'm seeing at an image, I will not be thinking always that okay, this particular image has 40% red, because the human brain is auto calculating all the combination and giving you the the interpretation of that this is a person, this is a dog, or this is a red color, this is maybe a grayish color. But internally what it is doing is it is going and checking, okay, the RGB values, the red, green and blue pixels for that particular image have more of a red in them. So maybe that's an apple. Okay, maybe it has a round shape, so that's definitely maybe a apple. It could also be a tennis ball. So lots of channels, they basically comprise together to form some kind of interpretation, which is what our brain processes. And channels are the one that actually make it split to all of them differently and make sense out of that. So you can compose all the channels to create the original information, but when you have to analyze the information, you'll have to split them into different channels. So it's all about generalizing the problem. The problem of artificial intelligence is about generalizing the different challenges, splitting them into smaller problems, and then trying to solve them. So when I have to detect a 6, I'll have to first learn how a horizontal line looks like. That's what I have to train my deep neural network for. So when it learns that there are 8 different edges which are possible to make any number, then it can also detect that okay, this particular number, it has horizontal and maybe a vertical edge and maybe a 45-degree slant edge. So maybe this is something, this must be a 6. Okay, it should be a number called 6. And let's say if it only has all the most of the lines as verticals, then mostly this should be 1. This is how the deep neural network learns it. Okay, let's quickly understand what this image is talking. So for that, I'll go back to the textual image here and I'll tell you, okay, so as I said, with the help of these 26 channels that we saw, we can make, I think, millions of words, and using those millions of words, we can make trillions of books as well. Okay, we can give this task to some machine and it will keep on writing the books and novels and everything. The way how what you have to understand here is that each of these characters, the channels, they combine together to form another group of channel. So when you say that let's say it's an apple, okay, let's say I'm creating a fruit detector neural network, which is say okay, this is a banana, this is an apple. Now these two are different channels, but within themselves there is another channel called as color, which is saying okay, the banana has to be looking yellow and the apple has to look red. Okay, in a particular example, even in that case, if you see not just the red color, the shape of banana has lots of vertical edges and shape of apple has lots of slant edges. If you see the lots of channels, they combine together to form another channels. So there is a composition property that is being followed here, and using one channel or multiple such channels, you can create, basically you start from a character, then you reach to words, then you reach to maybe phrases and sentences, and then you write paragraphs and maybe lots of huge books, the novels that you see, the series that you read. The way how this thing is composed together and to form another more meaningful information is what I'm trying to explain in the next image, which is here. As we're talking about the vision domain, we won't be talking about the alphabets here, we'll be mostly talking about edges. Okay, so the first pick here, what you see is that your neural network, just like the image above, is trying to detect the different types of edges which are existing in a particular image. So here if you see there are different set of edges here. So couple of them are 45-degree inclined, couple of them are, let's say, 30-degree inclined, some of them are, so basically these are different types of edges which are possible. And your channel, just like here we saw that there are 2 different channels to detect 2 different types of edges. Here we have, let's say, around 6 different channels, right? And those 6 have different tasks of detecting maybe edges based on width, the height, and maybe width or the angle. What you see on the next part here is called as texture. Similar to how we had words for a NLP domain, we said that by combining the characters we can make the words. Same way here we are combining the edges to make the textures. So if you split, or if you, let's say talking of one particular image here, okay, let's say here what you see is a full image, but when you keep zooming in, what you'd realize, let's say here is this particular section. If you talk about, let's say I'm just talking about the nose of the particular this rider, this particular nose here is a combination of, let's say, 20 by 20 pixels. So as I said, image is made of pixels. It's a matrix which has some kind of RGB information, right? So even this particular image is a combination of edges, colors, right? Initially when you zoom it, let's say currently it is at 500 times zoom, but if you zoom it further, you'll realize that it's finally nothing but a collection of edges which are aligned in different fashion to give it a look that it has. Talking of the colors, again, you cannot say that it's a red color, because there's some proportion of red which is higher at some places, and at some proportion of blue which is higher at some places, which gives it the color that it has. So basically all the channels are combined together to form the main information. Cool. So this is what we see in this particular image. This is going to be the most important image that you will be encountering, because that's how the deep neural network learns. It tries to extract the lowest level information first, saying that what are the edges that I see in this image. So if I give it an image of an apple or a dog, the first thing that it will do is go for the smallest information that it can get, the edges. Then what it does is tries to combine these edges together and tries to make sense, okay, are they following some kind of pattern? So yes, if you see the second column here, there is some kind of pattern and they are all not the same. There will be some differences, like saying that the gap between the edges, or is it making a circular shape, or is it making a vertical shape, and are they kind of blurry, or are they colorful, red, green and blue, or is there a straight edge pattern which is followed by them. So different edges, they combine to make a texture, and when we combine a texture we get the pattern. Now this is the formula that we have to first understand. Edges combine to make a texture, texture combine to make a pattern. Pattern, as you can intuitively you can imagine, is nothing but collection of such textures which we saw in the second column to say a higher order pattern basically. So if you are looking at a fruit, a jackfruit, or some kind of pattern, you'll be able to observe in that. This is what it is all about. So if you zoom in the jackfruit, you'll see that it's nothing but collection of pixels and maybe the edges, and at the higher level you can see that it's nothing but completely a fruit. So this is, if you take that as an example, you start from the left hand side, you zoom out, come far further, and then you'll realize, okay, it's following some kind of pattern, and those patterns are again combined together to form something called as parts. Now what is parts? Parts is nothing but, talking of a dog, nose will be one of the part and ear will be one of the part, and finally these parts are combined to make an object, the full object that we're talking about. It could be a dog, it could be an apple. One that you see here on the top right, you might realize, okay, this is something related to somebody's leg, or some pant or some belt is there. If you see the image on the right bottom side, you'll see that it is trying to detect a dog, right? And its features are coming from the previous layer, which is parts of object. They finally combine together to give you an object, and these parts of objects are formed by combining the patterns. So this particular rule is something which you have to remember. The edges give you textures, they combine to get you patterns, patterns combine to get you the parts of objects, then parts give you the objects finally. And even if you go further one level, multiple objects can give you something called as scenery. So if you look at one scene in front of you, there will be multiple objects, it won't be just one object. So if you want to add another dimension to it, another layer to it, you can say that a scene exists further. Cool. So I would leave this particular video for you all to watch and understand how you combine different. So basically it's an artist's video wherein he's trying to sketch an eye, a real looking eye. He starts from very basic just with the edges and colors, and the way how he finally reaches at this particular object is what deep neural is trying to do. This again is the way how our brain is trying to access the external information. Like it could be our audio information that we are trying to sense, it could be what we look into the nature, it could be a visual, or it could be what we are smelling in, outside. All these informations are actually processed, and these are the 4 layers that human brain has, which actually does all the processing out of the sensory input that we receive. Okay, this is another example of what you see here. On the topmost layer, if you see, there are 4 different categories: faces, cars, elephants and chairs. And when the neural network starts training, or when the neural network starts detecting an object, the way how it does is it first goes and tries to see what are the different edges that it can detect in the image. So if you give it an image of an elephant, all the objects that it sees, the first layer is only going to detect the edge. It could be a slant edge, it could be a straight or a horizontal or a vertical edge, but they're all the same. If you see the bottommost layer, they're all detecting the same thing. If you go further above, you'll realize that maybe the first image is only looking at the the eyes and maybe the nose and maybe a couple of curves and beard. The second image is mostly looking for maybe a circular object such as wheels, which is for the cars. Third image, maybe it's looking for something related to grayish pattern, which elements elephants usually have, just like that. So even the chairs usually have combinations of vertical and horizontal edges. So this is how it's trying to learn and trying to combine the edges into patterns into if you just try to follow this particular way, it starts from edges, then textures, the patterns. So it starts from edges, it tries to find out what's the texture of that image, then is there a pattern, and do they form a part of an object like nose and maybe the tail or something, and finally the object that is present in the image, right? The bottom image is again a representation of what you saw in the first layer, but with some other things such as colors. Maybe it also has some representation for the depth, but the upper part here, upper half, is mostly talking about the edge inclination. So what if the edge is slant? Is it 45 degree? Is it 90 degree? Is it 80 degree? Or is it horizontal? So just go through this image, try to understand how the neural network or how the processing of image is happening at the first layer. Same thing as we saw. Okay, this is the core concept of convolution. Here we are towards the end of the session. In the first session, I had just told you in the beginning that this is the core of your CNN, your convolutional neural network. The vision domain neural network is called as convolution neural network, and this particular image what you see is the core of it. Once you understand this, you will be able to understand all the future topics, and you will be able to understand how exactly the neural network is detecting my image. Detecting in the sense, how is it able to say that this is a dog, right? Okay, so what you see at the bottom here in the purple color is your original image. Let's say it's currently saying it's a 4x4 image. 4x4 means there are 4 pixels horizontally and 4 pixels vertically, and it forms a matrix. So this is my, let's say, an example input image. And what you see, the dark purple color or a blackish matrix, which is convolving, which is moving on top of the input image, right? This is called as a kernel. Kernel, what do you mean by kernel? Well, kernels are nothing but the feature, the channel extractor. The one, remember we were talking about the channels like alphabets, then colors, then different edges. This particular moving thing that you're seeing here is nothing but the channel detector. It detects that is a particular pattern exists in this input image or not. Does the image has a vertical edge? Does it have a slant edge? Does it have a red color in it, right? This is what this black color part is doing. It's just moving through the entire image, starting from the top left all the way till bottom right, and going through all the pixels to say does this particular image or this particular area that I'm looking at. So let's say the image size is 4x4, but the kernel size or the black color part which is moving is only 3x3. It is saying that in this particular 3x3 matrix, am I able to see any edge or not? And it's trying to pass on that information to the next layer. So what you see here is that there are 2 layers. The input layer is there, The kernel is trying to convolve on top of it, trying to move itself and passing the information to the upper layer, the higher layer, which is telling, okay, the horizontal edge is detected or not, right? This is the basic concept of how convolution happens. Convolution means you take an input image and you take a window kind of sort of thing. You move and rove around it from top left to the bottom right and see, are you able to recognize any patterns or not, any edges at the basic. After you pass the information, maybe the next layer is of 2 cross 2 dimension here. So I hope people are able to visualize why it is 2 cross 2. So we have 4 cross 4 input which is being convolved, okay? It is being convolved by 3 cross 3 matrix, which is a kernel, to give you an output of 2 cross 2 matrix. Any doubts in this? Like anybody who didn't understand why it is 2 cross 2 in the final?
Can you repeat once again?
Yeah. So what we have here is an input image of 4 cross 4. I hope you understand that. And you have a kernel. Kernel is nothing but a channel extractor. It identifies a particular feature in an image. It could be a color, it could be an edge, it could be a width of a edge, anything which is at the most basic level, which is what we saw in the top here, right? So it tries to recognize that. So this is called as a kernel. It's also called as a feature extractor because it is trying to extract some kind of feature from an input image. When this particular kernel convolves on top of the input image, it passes through all the pixels. It tries to cover the entire image, and the way how it is moving currently is it is shifting 1 pixel at a time on the right as well as at the bottom, right? And this way it is trying to cover all the input image pixels. And at the output layer here in the green zone, what you see, it is giving you a 2 cross 2 matrix. So the conversion of 4 cross 4 to 2 cross 2 by using a 3 cross 3 matrix or a kernel, this is called as convolution. And I would want to know if you have any doubts why this is working, or do you have any reason why it is working? Can you explain?
I mean, the 3 cross 3 kernel that is trying to convolve from the image. What exactly does it calculate? Does it calculate some like the edges that we were discussing? It tries to find those edges.
Let me tell you. So currently we can think of it is saying that it is trying to read the pixels, and it is trying to read the inputs and doing some kind of processing in it and giving you one output. This is how it is. So think of kernel as a neuron which is having multiple, like how we saw in the first session. Every neuron was receiving multiple inputs, but it was only giving you one output, and then again the output was passed to the further layers. So the same thing is happening here. Your kernel is acting as a neuron here. It is getting inputs from the input image. So right now if you see, the 3 cross 3 kernel can only extract 9 pixels, right? And then it is doing some kind of calculation, processing in it. It could be an element wise addition or multiplication or some kind of averaging of all the 9 pixels, and then finally it is passing it on to the next layer. So that's why what you see here is with the 3 cross 3 kernel, which is making a shift of 1 on right as well as at the bottom, okay, it is giving you 2 cross 2 output. So any doubt in why it is showing like that? Because I assume that you should be able to understand. Because see, there are only two possibilities for it. One is when it starts from the top left, it has only one place to move. And the same way goes for the bottom as well. Since the input size is only so much that it cannot go further, it cannot give you more than 2 cross 2 output, right? This is what the convolution here is doing, and this is what convolution means at the most basic level. These are the input layer and the output layer, and the kernel is operating on the input pixels to give you some kind of output, which could mean anything, which could say that okay, an edge here exists, or a red color is something what it has seen in this particular. So when it's on the rightmost side, let's say this here, so it might have seen a straight edge over there, and it is passing that information to the green zone on the top right side. The second pixel that you see here is something which is the result of the, basically it's a projection of what it has seen in the original image, right? If you see slightly enlarged view for, let's say, a larger picture, but if you see the kernel size is still the same, is the 3 cross 3 only. The black color kernel is still the same, but if you see the output here, from 4 cross 4 input we were getting 2 cross 2 output by using a 3 cross 3 kernel. What do you think? Is this thing logical, or do you have still any doubts of why it is showing me 3 cross 3 as an output? A 5 cross 5 input image is being convolved around by a 3 cross 3 kernel. Okay, it is projecting the 9 pixels every time it is moving and then giving it as one output, and all those outputs are again arranged in a matrix format, right, to give you an output image, an output feature map. So any doubt in this, or I assume you have understood why it is giving me 3 cross 3?
Yeah, currently no doubt.
Cool. So okay, so now one reason is what you have to understand why it is giving me 2 cross 2 is, and so at least in this case there is no scope of jumping 2 pixels. So this particular kernel that you are seeing here is only jumping 1 pixels on right and bottom to cover all the image. Here if you see, it is taking 2 steps to cover the horizontals and maybe again 2 steps to cover the verticals. But if I wanted, I could have used jump of 2 pixels instead of, because see, if you feel here, there is a lot of repetition happening, right? The kernel is trying to process lots of pixel multiple times. It doesn't have to. If it has to get some some sensible input out of the image, it is enough for it to just process it once. But if you see, because of the way how pixels are arranged and how the convolution goes from top left to bottom right, there are lots of pixels which are being repeated, which are being processed repeatedly, right? And this is something which we'll also cover in the further session, why it is not bad. So you might feel okay, maybe there are lots of information which is again repeatedly being passed to the top layer, right, to the second layer. But we'll realize later that no, this is still okay, we can still go on with this. Technically yes, it is not needed, you don't have to process the same pixels multiple times. And for that you might feel okay, if the image is of 6 by 6 pixels and if my kernel is of 3 cross 3, I just have to move once on the horizontal and the vertical, right? But yeah, that's something which is not going to be the case always. You might not have the multiplicative image which is having the factor which is a multiplication of the kernel size. So what you see kernel, you cannot again go for kernel of different size. Okay, you are saying that it's a 3 cross 3 kernel always, right? Here I am highlighting it could be 4 cross 4 as well. What if you just, for the first image, you just said okay, I'm going for a single kernel of 4 cross 4 and then I'm done. I don't even have to move horizontally and vertically. You might feel okay, I'm saving on lots of processing time, right? Because I'm not doing any calculation of shifting the matrix and recalculating anything in the for loop. You might feel that. But then the problem with that is this kernel is nothing but a matrix. It's in a programmatic fashion, it has to be represented into a 2D array. And what we are performing here that is called as convolution is nothing but a matrix multiplication. So when you have, let's say, imagined of having a 4 cross 4 kernel, that also means that you are going to perform a matrix multiplication for such a large kernel. Let's say if I give you an image of 1080 pixel high definition resolution, and if I ask you, okay, tell me what exactly do you see in this image. So what you'll do is you'll come to me saying that okay, I am taking a 512 size kernel and I'm going to just convolve it 2 times and I'm done covering the image. Then I can just make some kind of prediction. But then multiplying an 512 size matrix itself is not feasible. You have to think of it in a memory efficient and processing efficient fashion. That's the reason why we have smaller kernel size here, which is convolving on the bigger image. And if you ask me why not 4 cross 4, why just 3 cross 3, which, well, it's basically totally up to you. And the way how lots of researchers and the scientists have been, in the computer vision domain, how they have been doing till now is because they thought 3 cross 3 was something which was, maybe somebody can come to me saying that okay, I'll use 1 cross 1, that's even more processing efficient. I'll just go through each of the pixels. But in that case, you're not learning anything, right? In 1 pixel you cannot say that it's an edge or it's a red color or what exactly it represents. We need at least some kind of calculation, some kind of averaging happening wherein we share the information, like the way how I was saying, if you're talking about an alphabet, if you're using A every time or if you're using E every time, there is no sense out of it. But if you have a filter which can actually detect saying that okay, that's a bad example, but let's say if you're talking about a shape called as 1, you cannot go to every pixel saying that okay, I see a 1 here, this is a vertical edge, because it's just a simple pixel, until you actually combine it with a kernel which is of bigger size, which here we seeing that it's a 3x3. We could have thought of 2x2 as well, but then maybe some scientists thought okay, maybe this is something which again has to expand its view. It's basically called as receptive field. Okay, a kernel which is looking at an input image, okay, it is having a receptive field of 3x3, meaning it can only sense 9 pixels at a time. If I make it 2x2, you'd realize okay, the kernel is not really learning much, it is only learning from 4 pixels. That's why we made it 3x3. And why not 4x4 or 5x5? Because that's computationally expensive. So this 3x3 number what we see is basically out of the research, and lots of papers are based on that, and that's the standard that we follow, and that's completely a wish of the person who is making these neural networks. Yep, cool. So I think we are at the end, and what you see here is going to be the most important image, and is basically an extension of what we saw in the previous image. A 5x5 image is being convolved by a 3x3 kernel to give you a yellow layer, which is the second layer, right? I hope you can visualize it. And again the same 3x3, or maybe basically not same, another 3x3 kernel is convolved on the second layer to give you the third layer, which is a single pixel. So you imagine how the maths is working behind, right? You start from 5x5. If you're using 3x3 kernel, you get 3x3 pixels. Okay, so now I have a question. This is the last question. Let's say I have an image of 15x15. Okay, it's a very small image, and I have a 3x3 kernel which is convolving on it. What will be the output size? What will be the dimension of the output? Very important question. So just think it's a 15x15 image, and I have a 3x3 kernel which is going just like this, one step at a time. It's jumping 1 pixels right and bottom, and finally it is going to give me one, or let's make it even simpler. Okay, I have 7x7 image. This what you saw was a 5x5 image, right? I'm giving you a 7x7 image, and I have 3x3 kernel convolving on top of it. What should be the size of my output?
5x5.
Yes, anybody else? So anyone else wants to guess it? Okay, so that's a correct value. It's very simple. It's just that you have to ignore the first and the last pixels of the kernel, that the input size. So if the 3x3 kernel is making a jump of 1 pixel while convolving, that means you have to divide that, subtract 2 pixels from the input image, right? Here what's happening is, well, basically there is a mathematical formula for that, but if you can visualize, if you have a visualization strength, you can easily guess that why it is 5x5 if I give you a 7x7 input. If you see here also it's the same happening. From 5x5 it shifted to 3, that is reduction of 2 pixels on both the sides, basically 1 pixels on both the sides. And from the second layer when it started, it had nowhere else to go, so it just jumped into 1. And if you see, there's a reduction of 1 pixel even in that way. From 3x3 it became 1x1. It's not just 1 pixel, it's 1x1 matrix. Okay, so when I give you a 7x7 or let's say 11x11 image, after 3x3 convolution it will be 9x9, right? After that, okay, let's say, so now if I give you an example saying that for an image input of 11x11, how many times do I have to perform this convolution of 3x3 to reach 1? Okay, anybody? Just count it in your fingers, like how will the math work here? Start from 11x11. How many times do you have to perform convolution to reach 1x1? Just think. Make any guesses, that's fine.
Five.
So can you explain how you got 5?
From 11x11 it will become 9x9, then 7x7, 5x5, 3x3 and 1.
Cool, so that's correct. That's exactly how the convolution works. Okay, and what you saw, this conversion of 5 to 3 to 1 here is called as that there are 3 different layers in your learning. your neural network has 3 different layers, and the size of your input, which was originally provided, has been shrunk to 3 and then 1. That also means that the pixels that is lying at the end here in the last layer has seen all the input pixels. So that's where the concept of receptive field comes. Okay, here this is going to be the topic for next time, but I just want to leave it here saying that what is receptive field. Receptive field is nothing but how many pixels your kernel looks when it is convolving, right? So starting from the first layer, input layer, at a time your kernel can only look at 9 pixels, but when you're talking of the second layer, right, which comes, let's say, after this one here, this particular second kernel is able to see 9 pixels, but that's only in its local zone. Talking of globally, it is actually able to see 5 cross 5, that is 25 pixels. So you understood? I hope there is no doubt in that. The receptive field is nothing but how many pixels a kernel looks at while processing it. It's a matrix multiplication. The kernel size is of 3 cross 3, so of course the local receptive field of a kernel, local receptive field means at that particular layer what is the view for that kernel. So I'm talking of the second animation after this one here, it is only able to see 9 pixels. So a 3 cross 3 kernel can only see a local receptive field of 9, but if you're talking about a global receptive field, it depends on how many layers are lying in between, right? If I just tell you that I have n number of layers in my neural network, tell me what is the receptive field of my final layer in neuron. You won't be able to say it. You have to know lots of details for that. First, what is the size of your kernel? Is it 3 cross 3? Then at least you know what is the multiplication factor, right? You know that there are 9 pixels for every layer. Then you have to know what is the depth of your neural network. How many layers are there? A person says I have only 2 layers, right? Then you can very easily calculate, right? You have to say, okay, 9 is the this thing for the, so the receptive field calculation requires a couple of information here. When you have to find out that, let's say, how is it 25? It is nothing but 9 times pixels are there, and each of these pixels are again capturing 9 different input pixels, right? But if you see, there are lots of repetition here, right? If you talk about the yellow matrix, the middle pixel of the yellow matrix has seen almost all the pixels at once, but if you see the input image here, the 5 cross 5 purple color matrix, the middle pixel of this purple image has been seen by almost all the 9 kernels. The 9 times the kernel convolved on around this particular thing, the middle pixel was processed 9 different times. So would you agree with that? That middle pixel in the input image was convolved 9 different times. So anybody has a doubt when I say that middle pixel in the input image, that is, this particular thing here, it was processed 9 different times. Looking at the animation, you can make out, right, that this is being processed every time the kernel is shifting.
Yes.
So when you're talking of the global receptive field of the last layer, it is not just multiplying your size of kernel with number of layers. There are many factors such as what is the jump number, is it jumping 1 pixel at a time or is it jumping 2 pixels at a time. Then it's also about what is the size of your kernel, is it 3 cross 3 or 5 cross 5 or what is it. So of course there is a mathematical formula, and we'll go into the details of that in the next session, where we'll understand how important it is to know the receptive field and how much importance it has in understanding the image. So the entire architecture of your neural network depends on your receptive field, how you calculate it, how you convolve around your image to finally get a global receptive field which is supposed to be equivalent to the size of your input image. Your receptive field should be the one which has seen all the image pixels, which has gone through the details of all the pixels, and it has stored all the information in single pixels. So this is what a receptive field is. So there are 2 terms, local receptive fields and global receptive field. Yep. So finally we are here. First assignment is more of an exercise. You don't have to think about it and you don't have to write your own words in it. It's simply following this Colab notebook. So if you have made a Colab account, which is free for you, for all the Gmail users, basically Google has opened up this platform called as Collaboratory, and it provides free GPU access and runtime for Python, so you can run all your Python codes free right in your browser. So I think in the last session I have already explained the concept of Colab and how basically these are all cells. You execute your cells by pressing Control Enter, or you just focus on it and go to runtime and say run. So there is also a button here which says play, which means that you are running that particular cell. What I want you all to is that go ahead and it's a very simple Pythonic exercise which just talks about the simple things like printing, maybe arithmetic operations, conditional operations. And if you see, all these quizzes are sections are divided into quiz. It starts from here, quiz 1. For every cell there is a quiz, and they are very simple. If you see here, this is just to make sure that you are comfortable in Python, because what we are going to learn is neural network designing in Python. Your programming language is going to be Python, so this is just a simple exercise to maybe those who are already familiar with data science background, they must be knowing Python already. If not, I think this is an opportunity for you to just go through it once. It'll hardly take close to 1 or 2 hours. So of course the deadline is not tomorrow. Deadline is that I'll be publishing basically, it will be mostly 3 or more days. It's a huge exercise. Even when we were given this exercise, we almost took 1 week. So but yeah, these are pretty simple. You just have to run through all these codes. Maybe if you really want to understand and the syntaxes, it's always better to create another. So what I have asked in the assignment here is go through this particular Colab notebook, create another Colab notebook. So that's something which you can do from file, new notebook, right? Refer to the notebook shared, which is this one. Run all the code cells one at a time and understand. So I don't want you to copy paste the code here. You have to go ahead, create a new notebook and start typing these things by yourself. So guys, I hope you understand. This is how we practice, this is how we learn. Until you do something for by yourself, you won't be able to. And this is going to be the simplest exercise here, wherein you just have to look at the thing and replicate. That's how you'll be able to get yourself there'll be brain memory for the syntaxes for Python. Your muscle memory will be there. You'll be able to recall what to type when. So after the print, you will be able to type round brackets. So basically this is nothing but learning the syntaxes. Go through them, and what you have to do is create a GitHub repo called as Vision AI. So I hope everybody has their GitHub account set up. That's what was taught in the last session. What you have to do is create a repository here called as Vision AI. Create a readme file, so a markdown file called as assignment_a.md. So I hope you know what md file means. You can go and research if you don't know. And in that, so basically in the Vision AI repository, you have to create a chapter 1 folder, which is what we are doing today. And in that you create assignment_a.md. What you have to do and what you have to write as a content there is, you have to go through this all this notebook, and there is a question which is asked at the end of it, right? And believe me, these questions are going to teach you a lot of things. This is not just asking you to print the same. Basically these questions will be mostly like changing the value of a variable. Let's say instead of keeping 2, what if I put it as a 3, right? What will be my final output? This was to make sure that people just don't copy paste and run it in the cell and then just submit it like that. So the exercise is basically to understand the code execution, the way how the control flow works, and finally how the variables are being manipulated. You'll understand all the syntaxes of Python in that. The question is, so if you follow the question, you'll understand that what exactly is it asking, right? It is, if you see here, if the final value of this has to be 268.5, then what should be the value of x here? Then you will have to manually go through the code. You will realize, okay, there is a multiplication happening here, there is a power happening, mathematical power. So you'll realize, okay, this is how the code. So the whole idea of this exercise is to manually go through this code, and if you won't copy paste as it is, you will be learning a lot out of it. And of course, without actually going through this code manually, you won't be able to answer any of these quizzes. So yep, that's the whole idea. Please go through it, and the assignment A is just that. You have to create this, create finally a file called assignment_a.md, and write all your responses in that particular file. And this particular thing is what I will be looking at, and I'll be evaluating, saying that which all answers are correct. So since we only have few people who have joined the call, so I'm not expecting more than 3 to 5 submissions. And those who want to learn, those who really want it graded, I would really push you guys to go through it. And that's how the assignment A is. Assignment B is about how much have you understood out of this session. So yep, you have to answer these questions which are asked here in maximum of 200 words, right? But in your own words. Now this own words doesn't mean that, let's say you didn't understand 30% of the concept when I was teaching. That doesn't mean that you don't write the answer. What you have to do here is whatever that you remember, the keywords, the terms that are written on the PPTs here, you go ahead and Google them. So when I'm saying what are the channels and kernels, of course nobody will understand in first attempt. That's the whole task. You go ahead and research. So if you would have seen the top motto of the session, it is basically to learn and research, right? And that's what you have to do for each of these questions, why we are actually using 3x3 kernels, right? So try to understand the terminologies. The questions are very tricky. They won't be very simple. It's like when I'm saying nearly, that has some meaning to it. When I'm saying always, that has meaning to it. So try to explain the concepts in your own words, but again in a logical way, and try to contain them in 200 words. You can use figures as well. If you have found some publicly available Google image, or while trying to research you found some images that were interesting to you, which helped you understand the concept, you can include them in the MD file. So yes, again you have to do the same thing. Create an assignment B.md file under the same folder which was created for the first assignment, assignment A and B, same folder, and write all your answers in there. So write your questions and what answer that you have formed in 200 words. If you have any images, you can attach there. So that's what the particular assignment, these two assignments are about. If you have any doubts, you can ask me right now about the assignment or any concept that you didn't understand. So I can take questions here. So I'll pause the recording.